Okay, welcome everyone to Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. This first day of May 2020. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show. Up first, let's see, there we go. We've got flood watch out for the Kuskokwim Valley as well as the Kuskokwim Delta. That's for obviously the Kuskokwim River. That's a flood watch out tonight through tomorrow afternoon, through Saturday afternoon, for the potential of flooding anywhere along the river due to wherever an ice jam may form. And again, that's out for tonight and tomorrow. And from there, let's move on to the satellite images. And got a weakening band of clouds pushing northward, but still south of the Panhandle, spreading some light rain and showers, and increasing the clouds over the southern southeast coast. Most of the action still out over Dixon Entrance. Otherwise, looks like a possible area of showers may be developing over the Wrangell Mountains, southeast interior. Otherwise, kind of a mostly cloudy, partly sunny kind of day across southern south central Alaska. More sunshine, though, up in the interior. And not too bad out along the Arctic coast. There are some lower clouds just grazing the central and western Arctic coast a little bit there. Could be patchy areas of fog and flurries, but nothing too widespread or serious. And mostly clear skies through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. A few clouds around the island there, and then that increases as you head down towards St. Matthew Island. Look like some partly sunny skies for the Pribilofs. And then down over the Aleutians, we've got low pressure with some clouds and a washed out band of showers that just moved through the Alaska Peninsula there on the loop. And looking at that once more, you can see basically kind of an easterly flow there across the Bering Sea with higher pressure up over the Russian Far East and a trough there over the Aleutians. And that producing southeast flow into the Alaska Peninsula, to a lesser extent Kodiak Island. As you can see, that kicked off a few scattered showers, mostly southwest Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula. Area of rain, periods of light rain, eastern Aleutians, nothing heavy, and a trough over southern Alaska, that creating the clouds with scattered isolated showers, maybe a little more prevalent eastern Copper River Basin, North Waytoke possibly, on into the Yukon. But amounts have been quite light, high pressure over the north slope, winds light, and a few clouds, otherwise not a bad day up there. And the outer edge of the rain shield now pushing into Prince of Wales Island and sliding up toward Ketchikan and Annette. But the heavier, more rain-producing cloudiness still down over the Queen Charlottes there, with the main system well to the south. Otherwise, we've got some showers that end as you head out toward the western Aleutians. And for tonight, we're looking at high pressure holding in the north, so mostly clear over the north central interior, variable clouds, southern Alaska, just a slight chance of an isolated shower or two for the eastern Copper River Basin, maybe the Seward area, southern Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, a little bit better chance of some scattered light shower activity, as well as northeast Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Periods of rain, but nothing heavy, and wind's not a factor at all with that, as that system stays well to the south of the Panhandle there. Northern areas of the southeast coast, Juneau, Haines, over to Yakutat, just probably mostly cloudy skies. And the Aleutians, periods of light rain, fog, light winds, and areas of IFR. For the outlook for tomorrow, Saturday, first day of the weekend, so have some remnant moisture there with that washed out frontal boundary that's pushed up into the southern Panhandle, and just some leftover clouds and moisture mainly in the south. Could be some partly sunny skies in the northern Panhandle tomorrow, as well as the Copper River Basin with a risk of a shower. Far eastern areas toward the border, mostly sunny in the interior. Looks mostly sunny Cook Inlet, even Kodiak Island, a few clouds down towards Sitkinak and AKwx. Otherwise dry Bristol Bay with mostly cloudy skies, scattered showers in the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian areas. Otherwise, high pressure holds there from the Russian Far East across the Arctic coast into the Mackenzie River Delta, all at about 1,020-25 millibars. Low pressure slips on east of the Queen Charlottes, and again, that just keeps it a little damp over the southern Panhandle through tomorrow. Take a look at the outlook for Sunday. we've got another weak front pushes wet weather into the central and southern southeast coast. Chance of showers, Juneau to Haines, Elfin Cove, up to Yakutat, a little bit better chance of showers there. Just a risk at Cordova. Variably cloudy skies, or clouds will be variably variable with maybe some sun breaks here, south central Alaska, Prince William Sound. Really that low south of Resurrection Bay, really not producing much in the way of any weather, but we'll give northwest flow to Kodiak Island, and that should result in a mostly sunny day there with mild temperatures. Sunny over the remainder of the interior from the Arctic coast, although you may see some low stuff early on. Right along the Arctic coast early in the day. Northeast winds will keep that off the coast of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Mostly cloudy St. Lawrence Island. Could see some sun breaks over the Pribilofs. Dry for the Aleutians. Next front pushing rain into the western Aleutians. And from there, looking at low temperatures for Saturday morning. A little above zero. 0 to 5 for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Some good numbers in the Brooks Range are Anatuvik and Arctic Village, just a little below 10, but teens. Upper Yukon Valley, westward to Kotzebue, Selawik Valley, as well as the northwest coast. 20s for the Seward Peninsula, lower 20s St. Lawrence Island, and upper teens to as high as upper 20s, kind of a spread there over the central interior. Copper River Basin, mid-20s. The Sitna Valley, mid to upper 20s. Otherwise, lower to mid-30s for Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, on up into the Manuska Valley. Maybe a little cooler around the Willow area in Butte. Otherwise, upper 30s, northern panhandle, lower 40s with more moisture and clouds over the southern panhandle, upper 30s Kodiak Island, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. And the Aleutians, lows in the 30s, just a shade below the frost point at St. Paul, the low of 31. And for your highs in the afternoon, staying in the teens, eastern Arctic coast, Point Barrow right around 20, otherwise warming as you head west and southwest to 29 degrees at Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, and near 30 for the Brooks Range there, Arctic Village pushing up to 32. South of the mountains, though, in the lower 40s, upper 30s, cooling off, Ambler 38, kind of a summer-type pattern now, or late spring with the warmer conditions over the eastern central interior and cooler out toward the Bering Sea, with lower 50s for the Kuskokwim Valley, cooling to mid-30s out along the coastline, mid to upper 40s for Bristol Bay, upper 40s, lower 50s for south central Alaska, and the southeast coast, lower to mid-50s, upper 40s for your highs, Kodiak Island, and upper 30s, lower 40s there in the Aleutians. And for the lows, Tuesday morning, back down to just above zero there for the Brooks Range, and possibly the North Slope, 10 to 15 for your lows on the Arctic coast, and down in the mid-teens for the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, Noatak Valley, Kivalina, upper teens, St. Lawrence Island, teens and 20s over much of the interior, south of the Alaska Range, mostly in the lower to mid-20s, coldest over the Copper River Basin, and upper 30s to near 40 for the low, not too bad, well above freezing for the Panhandle, upper 20s to lower 30s, southern Alaska, mid to upper 30s along the coast, same for Kodiak Island, lower to mid 30s for the Alaska Peninsula and the western Aleutians. And looking at your highs, Sunday afternoon, we've got lower to mid 50s here for much of southern Alaska, mid to upper 50s for the southeast coast. Some areas may push into lower 60s there. So sit in the valley, you could see some lower 60s on Sunday afternoon, possibly Copper River Basin, mostly in the mid 50s there. Bristol Bay, 55 to 60, about sums it up.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for Saturday morning, IFR, North Slope Arctic coast. Good VFR. Crest of the Brooks Range, southward into Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait, marginal VFR Kodiak Island, IFR spreading on up into Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, and then you got marginal from Yakutat on down toward Dixon Entrance along the coastline of the Panhandle. Out in the Bering Sea, batch IFR over the southwest Bering, mostly along the north of the Aleutians, marginal VFR central areas, and then another band of IFR St. Lawrence Island along the southwest coast, covering all of Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula starting out VFR. And for Saturday afternoon, Marginal VFR, Alaska Peninsula, Bering Sea, all of the Aleutians, and still IFR remaining along the coast, north coast of Bristol Bay, on up Yukon Delta, Nunivak Island. Good VFR in the interior, marginal VFR Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast. And mostly VFR for the Panhandle, with marginal VFR along the coast, Prince of Wales Island, North Gulf Coast, marginal. And the North Slope, Arctic Coast, marginal VFR. Good VFR holding clear skies mostly for Sunday morning, the interior, south of the Brooks Range. North of the mountains up there, marginal for the North Slope, and then central eastern Beaufort Sea coast looking IFR. IFR also St. Lawrence Island. Along the eastern Bering Sea there, just catching the southwest coast, and VFR for the Prince William Sound into the northern Panhandle. And the afternoon, still some marginal VFR north part of the southeast coast, south of Lynn Canal Glacier Bay. Otherwise, not too bad VFR. Interior, again, mostly VFR. So pretty good weekend coming up for areas from Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, northward. Even better on the North Slope now with VFR almost out to the central coast. It does extend to the west side, but IFR for areas from Dead Horse, Prudhoe Bay, Kaktovik, Barter Island, St. Lawrence Island, specifically Savunga down to Makoriak. You're still in the IFR zone. Marginal for the Pribilofs, Aleutians. You've got some areas of marginal VFR with some scattered VFR mixed in. Same thing for the Alaska Peninsula. Passes, Anatuvik and Adigan, VFR. Possible marginal VFR early on both northern entrances, but the afternoon VFR north to south. Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR. Same forecast for rainy VFR. Windy VFR. And Isabel, also another VFR day, right through the weekend actually for all these interior passes. Mentasta VFR both tomorrow and Sunday. Tanita as well, VFR through the weekend. Portage, marginal VFR tomorrow, and that may give way for a VFR day on Sunday. Chilkoot and White, VFR. And freezing levels, 2,000 feet, a little farther north, not quite to the Brooks Range, but across the upper Yukon Valley and the flats westward, across the Koyukuk, Kobuk Valley to Selawik, and then southward to Nunivak Island, Kodiak Island, 4,000 to 6,000 feet over the southeast. And from there, taking a look at icing. With the moisture pushing into the Panhandle, with that jet pushing it up from the south and southwest, we've got mostly isolated moderate, a couple of zones of moderate coming through and pushing over toward the border tomorrow, and narrow band of, or area, small area of moderate or considerable moderate rime icing possible there over the central or east central Alaska range. Otherwise not too bad, pretty much icing free everywhere else. And the jet stream, upper level ridge there along the western Arctic coast, and a 60 knot flow coming into the central and eastern coast. And then we're looking at southeast flow, pretty light in the interior at this elevation, 30 to 40 knots, kicking up to 60 knots through the Bering Strait. And the main jet near the western Aleutians, but really to the south of the entire forecast area, but then comes back from the southeast into the Panhandle. And from there going to 9,000 feet. High pressure, light winds over the northern, or really just about all interior Alaska. 30 knotters coming into the southern Panhandle, 50 knots south of the Aleutians, and at 3,000 feet, about the same pattern. Low pressure over the Fox Islands, another one west of the Queen Charlottes, with the strongest winds south of Dixon Entrance. Otherwise, light winds over interior Alaska. Turbulence-wise, maybe some moderate chop.
So that Galena flood back in 2013 was at the intersection of weather and climate. Rick, I often get questions about the difference between weather and climate. How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, that's a really good question, John. One of the analogies that I like to use, the wardrobe analogy. So in my closet, in my dresser, I've got clothes appropriate for 90-degree weather and 50 below weather. That's the climate part of my wardrobe. But what I'm going to put on today, am I going to wear my Hawaiian shirt because it's going to be a hot July day, or am I going to wear my bunny boots because it's going to be 50 below? That's the weather part of my wardrobe.
You know, there's another interesting analogy. I've heard it said that climate is like your personality, whereas weather is like the mood you're in today. It's like that old John Denver song. Some days are diamonds and some days are stones. That's how weather works.
Of course, it's really a continuous range. Just as the Galena ice jam flooding was the result of a weather event, that ice jam, up against that cold spring, a climate event. So too with less impactful events. For instance, a daily record high temperature is a weather event, one day's high. But we put that in a climate context, say comparing to a century or more of individual temperatures on a given date.
So these extreme events like record high temperatures also happen on the seasonal time scale. Just in the last few years, we've had what was called a marine heat wave in the waters south of Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. But the water temperatures in that area set new records in 2015 and 2016.
And most Alaskans are acutely aware that big wildfire seasons are becoming more and more common, most recently in 2015, and the frequency of million-acre seasons has doubled since the early 1990s.
Just this past winter, we had another event in the Bering Sea. The ice extent in the Bering was lower than it had ever been in the last 150 years. That's about as far back as the good records go. There'd never been another year like this one in the Bering with so little sea ice. That had major impacts on the communities along the west coast and the northwest coast.
So, John, what have you been hearing from folks around town about these kind of climate extremes?
I've heard from a number of people who've been here a long time that winters just aren't what they used to be. The average temperatures are higher than they were back in the 1960s and 1970s, and we just don't get the extreme cold days, the days down in the minus 50s or even the minus 60s that we used to experience in Fairbanks back in the 1960s, 1970s, and even into the 1980s.
Well, and it's not just winter either. 2016 and 2017, the summers brought unusually muggy, humid weather to Fairbanks. We're not used to thinking of that in interior Alaska, but record high humidities during the summer months. As in the winter, we've had a significant increase in freezing rain events, since about 2000. So much so that DOT has changed their road treatment strategy, and now we have the school district building in winter rain days into the calendar. And of course, we all need good weather forecasts for these high impact weather events.
We know, though, that weather forecasts are sometimes wrong just 3 or 4 days in advance. So if these weather forecasts and the models they're based on can't pick up events like freezing rain 3 or 4 days ahead, how can we believe what they say about climate for the future?
Well, that's a really good question, John. And I think the important thing to remember is that parts of the system are predictable.
So climate models can't give you weather for particular days or even for particular months or years. They actually predict averages. These are averages over periods of a decade or two, or even averages over periods of several years. So they don't give us the month-to-month information that we might want. What are they telling us about the future, though?
Well, these climate models are telling us on the decades-long time frames that warmer winters are going to become more common. We're going to have more frequent, very low sea ice years with late freeze up and early meltout. And the same will be true on Alaskan rivers. We'll have more frequent seasons when freeze up is late and break up is early.
One of the other common threads in these climate model predictions is that heavy rain events and heavy snow events will become more common in the future. That's actually a prediction that the models make for mid-latitudes as well as for high latitudes in areas like Alaska. So we can expect the heavy downpours to become heavier and the heavy winter snows to become heavier than we've been used to. They're also predicting more frequent freezing rain events, getting back to what you talked about earlier. These events that might have happened just once every year or two in the past could actually end up happening several times in a winter in the future, according to the climate models.
And it is important to remember that even in a warming world, there are still going to be seasons and years that are colder than the average, but these cold seasons will become less and less common. So, John, maybe I don't need to have those bunny boots in my closet anymore?
Well, at least you won't need to wear them as often as you did in the past.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Okay, for sea ice, still have it near Nunivak Island into Kuskokwim Bay and back to the northwest between St. Lawrence Island and St. Matthew Island, and a little bit left in Bristol Bay. It's about gone in Cook Inlet. So moving on to coastal water forecast for the Panhandle tomorrow. Outer coastline, central north coast, east-northeasterlies at 20 knots, seas 9 to 11 feet. Small craft advisories on the south coast for those 25-knot easterly winds with 11-foot seas. Light winds over the southern inside waters at 10 knots. And for Passage Canal, or Stevens Passage, north at 15. Lynn Canal, north at 20. And for Sunday, small craft advisories for the coast, central coast, southeast 25 knots, even stronger along Prince of Wales Island, southerlies at 30 knots, seas still at 11 feet. Light winds up north, east at 15, south 15, or variable 15 over the central northern inside waters, and Clarence Strait, southeast at 20, with seas at 7 feet. And for Prince William Sound, northeast winds 10 knots, seas slight. Same thing for northern Cook Inlet, south of the Forelands, north 15, turning northwest at 15 for Kamishak Bay, north 15 for the Barren Islands. North Gulf Coast, we've got northwest winds at 10 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. And get the cursor on the arrow. There we go for Sunday. Northeast 15 for Cook Inlet, 20 knots, Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands. East 20 for the western North Gulf Coast. A little stronger toward Middleton Island. Small craft advisories there with 9-foot seas. And northeast at 15 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak, north to northeast, 15 knots, seas 3 to 5 feet. Kind of variable winds there, 10 to 15 for the Alaska Peninsula, variable at 10 for Bristol Bay, and the water southwest of Kodiak Island. For Sunday, west 15 knots, Bristol Bay, north 15 for Kodiak Island, west 15, Bering Sea side of the peninsula, southern side, Pacific side, north at 15. And out west to the Aleutians, Fox Islands, Unalaska Island, east at 15, Unimak Island, north 10 to 15, Central Aleutians, north to northwest, 15 to 24 to 9-foot seas, and north to northwest, winds 10 to 15 knots with 4 to 6-foot seas, Western Aleutians. And for Sunday, small craft advisory, that next front coming in, 25, maybe 30 knots out of the southeast, strongest west of Kiska Island, 7 to 9-foot seas. Adakanatka, east to northeast, 20 knots, north 15 knots on Alaska Island, or northwest 15 on Alaska Island, north 15 Unimak Island with 4 to 6-foot seas. Or west coast, Yukon, Delta, North 15, north 10, Kuskokwim Delta, northeast 10 to 15 for the St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs, light variable winds at 10 knots, St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. Outlook for Sunday, north 15, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, north 20 knots, Yukon Delta coast, south of Nunivak Island, northwest at 20, northwest 15 for the Pribilofs, north 20 for the northern Bering Sea. And for eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west 10 to 15, light winds on the central coast, light easterlies on the west side down to Cape Lisburne, and no wind for the Chukchi Sea. For Sunday, north 15 from Wales to Cape Lisburne, and northeast 5 to 10 on the western Arctic coast, southwest 10 on the central coast, west at 10 for the eastern stretch. And looking at tonight's forecast again, a flood watch out for the Kuskokwim River, there from the Kuskokwim Valley all the way out to the mouth of the Delta, and that's for possible ice jam flooding for tonight and tomorrow, and that watch is due to end at 6 p.m. Saturday afternoon. Otherwise, a nice day across the state with just variable clouds, most of sun in the north central interior, a few clouds with still some sunshine in the southern part of the state, just an isolated threat of showers scattered around, a little bit better chance Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, rain, fog, drizzle with a weak low in the east central and eastern and central Aleutians, periods of light rain over the panhandle. And moving on, tomorrow, chance of rain continues, southeast coast, mostly cloudy to the north, sunny over the interior, isolated showers Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, dry with light winds for the Bering Sea. Otherwise, the next day, front pushes in, 25 to 30 knot winds with periods of rain. Another front with 25 to 30 knot winds pushes into the panhandle. That's all I've got time for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.